We will be asking a total of 17 questions. We're going to do round robin. I'm going to lead off with the first question, and we're going to move down the line, okay? And we're going to have some questions that have more than one question. They're questions within questions, okay? So the board member is going to read the entire question. If it's two parts, they're going to read all parts at the beginning, okay? And you'll have a chance, you've got the questions in front of you, you'll have a chance to refer to those and look at those. If you need a break at any time, let us know. We'll take a break. We'll do whatever we need to do. You mentioned, is it okay for you to get up and walk around? Absolutely. We are taping this tonight on video to have it available for those that may want to view that were not able to be here. And also, if something happens to one of our board members during this week that we're going to be doing interviews, we'll have that to refer back to that, you know, just to take out the unforeseen element there. Okay, we're going to begin, and we want you to be as candid with us as you can, and relax, take a deep breath, and we'll get into this, okay?
Yes.
First question. Tell us about your background as an educator and how your previous experiences have prepared you to be the superintendent of Winfield City Schools.
Let me begin by saying I'm humbled and I'm honored to be able to sit and soon stand before you and interview for the position of superintendent. I've been blessed throughout my educational career to have great leaders all throughout my career that have modeled integrity, honor, character, and they've helped mold the fabric of the person that I am, and I'm thankful to God for that. My career began back in 1986 in South Alabama, in a place y'all probably heard of called Sweetwater, Alabama. I was hired as a teacher and coach at Sweetwater High School. I was very fortunate to be under the leadership of a great administrator, a great football coach, and served as an assistant coach, and we won the state championship my first year as coach at Sweetwater High School. I learned about hard work, discipline, integrity, and what it takes to be a champion from that experience. At the very tender age of 22 years old, I was the varsity boys' head basketball coach. And I learned a good bit about what it is to be a leader and not be a friend to 18-year-old boys that you're coaching. And again, my football experience served me well in that regard. I also learned a lot about Sweetwater. It's a community that embraces everything that the school district does, much like Winfield does. I learned the importance of immersing yourself in the community. Sweetwater supported their football team, Bulldogs, and they were there every Friday night. But they were at plays, they were at any activity. And back in my day, we didn't have a band program at Sweetwater. But anytime the school opened, that community embraced it. I learned to be a part of that community. We attended church together. There was one place to eat, and we ate together and fellowship together. And it taught me a lot about the character and quality of great people, just like we have here in Winfield. I later on had the opportunity to go to Fayette Middle School and became the athletic director. I was hired in that position at Fayette Middle School, and again was surrounded by some wonderful Christian leaders who were great role models for me. They set the tone for expectation, and I was very pleased and very blessed to be in their presence. As the athletic director, I learned a lot about scheduling, about budgets, about communicating with parents, a lot of organization. And back in that day, we didn't have the technology to do it. It was written on paper and it was sent to the state. And I learned about timelines, managing a budget. I also learned about curriculum and instruction as a classroom teacher. Taught social studies, taught physical education. Apparently my principal saw something in me, and 3 years later I was named assistant principal of Fayette Middle School. I learned a good bit about discipline. I learned a good bit about safety during those years, and I learned a little bit about curriculum instruction. 2 years later, I was blessed and fortunate to be hired as the principal of Fayette Middle School. And when I was, we were very data driven and very interested in test scores. And to be honest with you, we mirrored what we do here. And I think that's why Terrell Kirkpatrick had an interest in me. We would print out those SAT scores. We would print out and look at not just the content, but the process clusters, and we will break them down. Some who are in this audience will appreciate what I'm about to say, but we were in the 70th percentile. We had the same exact scores as Winfield did. And we were in the highest A9s, the 7, 8s, and 9s. And I say that because the person we compared ourselves with was Winfield. And that was the standard. Well, some things happened during my time as principal, and Arvin Meritor closed, Cotton Mill closed, we lost industry, our culture changed, our population changed, but our drive and our passion to be a very good, strong school system did not change. We went from the 70th percentile to about national average in test scores, and we had to determine some things to do. I'll expound on that a little bit later. But in the position of principal, I learned about budgets. I learned about 2 of these and 1 of these and being an effective listener. I learned compassion and empathy and love for my faculty and staff. And sometimes it's very difficult when you move from the teaching role into the administration role. Some of my teachers even ask me, what do we call you? You can call me Mr. Thomley, Coach Thomley, however you want to, and that's what they call me. I said, I'm here to serve you. I think if you read my application, you'll hear it said over and over, I'm a servant leader. Not ashamed to say that, and I believe in the power of prayer. I prayed for this school, for the school board, for the teachers, for the children, and for the best for this school district. I learned about capital planning as a building principal. We had a renovation project, and so we had our gym renovated during the middle of the school year, and we also had some building renovation during the middle of the school year. So I learned about safety. I learned about keeping children away from non-speaking English workers who might say some words they didn't need to hear. I learned about being very careful about our transportation as it flowed during that construction of the gym. As I mentioned, we had budgets, curriculum, and instruction was very important to us. Scope and sequence of how we delivered that instruction. I immersed myself in the community as a deacon at my church, and I also had to balance being a father, a husband, and worry about 550 children who were full of estrogen and testosterone. That's what I used to say. I'm the principal of that school. Mr. Kirkpatrick invited me to Winfield 14 years ago, and I'll share about that a little later too. And I was offered the position of elementary school principal and served in that position for 8 years. I learned even more about data, instruction, commitment to quality, how this community embraces and loves these children, these teachers, how the Board of Education supports these teachers, administrators, and leaders. It takes the village to raise a child, and that's why we are what we are right now. I've served the past 5+ going on a 6 year as assistant superintendent. I've learned a good deal about federal programs, special education, transportation, athletic director, drug-free and safe schools, capital projects. I'll continue with that as well. And I will share that in my 20+ years as a practicing administrator, I believe the experiences that I've had and the persons of character that have been an influence in my life have well prepared me to be superintendent of Winfield City Schools, and it is a position that I would hold with the great esteem and renown.
The next question is, what do you see as the role of the superintendent as it relates to employee groups, students, the community, and the school board?
On any average year, I've been here 14, we're going to have about 1,250 students. This year we've got 1,263. I like that. And I can tell you this, double that number and that represents 2 parents, and that's 2,500 people. Single that number, and it could be more, and that's 1 grandparent, and that's 1,250. That equals 5,000. Add 100 employees who are certified and support staff, add a spouse, and add children, and you're looking about 5,400 people. That is the community, and there's a vested interest in this school district. They all have an interest in it. The role of the superintendent works at the pleasure of the board, and they work together to ensure that the boys and girls get the instructional materials that they need to be successful, that they are, that we maintain discipline in the classroom, and we're allowed to do that because those teachers are supported by their administration. The administration is allowed to do that because they are supported by the superintendent and the board. And I think that you learn empathy, love, and compassion for the people you see, immersing yourself in this community. I've had the opportunity to speak at churches, at civic organizations, at book clubs, probably some would say not so smart, but be a little league umpire and do several things within the community. I think the position of superintendent, you are accountable to those children, and that's an awesome responsibility. You're accountable to people's livelihood as employees. You are as well. And this community expects nothing but excellence, and they've had that for a long time, and that didn't happen by chance. I also believe that it's very important for the superintendent to be a visible presence in the school buildings, to speak to the teachers when they come in, and not just say hello, but say, "Hi, Amy Duckworth, how's Nathan doing?" And I know I'm using some names, and I have an advantage because I am a person from the system that some don't. But I think you know your people, and they know you care about them. You attend funerals, and you weep and you grieve when you lose loved ones. You write them notes and tell them that you're proud of them. You correct them in private and love on them and tell them it's nothing personal, it's business, and I want you to do better, and then you move on. And I think that's what our teachers expect, and I think that's what this community expects. So to answer your question, I think, again, the village raises the child. That includes the board, the superintendent, and this entire community. And you're immersing in the community, and you're also attending things like going to a teacher's child's park and recreation game. Boy, does that mean a lot to them. Just a kind word. And I think those are the kind of things that exemplify the quality and the character of the person that you want to lead the school district.
Thank you.
What is your greatest professional disappointment, and what did you learn from that disappointment?
You know, that's a great question. When I interview, I do something very similar too. You learn a lot that way. And I thought about that a lot. And I will say this, my greatest professional disappointment, in my opinion, occurred when I served as principal of Fayette Middle School. Now, you remember I mentioned to you that we were sat 10 scores, we were in the 70th percentile, 7th, 8th, and 9th, stay down. Economy dropped and things changed. I took it upon myself because I was listening to teachers and we were trying to figure out what to do, and I went to my assistant principal. Teachers were telling us that students aren't bringing their pencils to class, they're not bringing their books, they're not doing their homework, they're sleeping in class, they're being disrespectful. We just had so many complaints about student discipline. So I went to my assistant principal and took it upon myself, and I said, we're going to fix this. Back in that day, we didn't have I-Now chalkable. We had a system, y'all might remember, called Oscar. And I presented printed the student rosters of every boy and girl, 5 through 8, in Fayette, out of Oscar. And I made a spreadsheet, and I put beside it, no pencil, talking in class, didn't bring book. And I put it on the wall beside each homeroom. And I gave teachers a red pen. And I told them, I said, put a dot every time they do something not supposed to happen. And I told the kids, if you get 2 red dots in a week, I'm going to powder you. Me and the assistant principal. And I said, we're going to do that for 6 weeks. Now, that's all the people I told. I didn't tell the board, superintendent, or nobody else. You're asking about my biggest I'm getting there. So we rocked and rolled along the first week, you know, my teachers loved it. And second week came, and we administered a good bit of corporal punishment. I started getting some phone calls about the middle of the second week. About the middle of the third week, I heard from the superintendent, some board members, and some others, some parents, and a lot of folks. We stayed the course for 6 weeks, and we did that initiative. I call it the Red Dot Initiative. And the purpose of that was we were loving those kids, and we wanted those kids to be focused on instruction. And everybody understood the intent of what the plan and the intent was behind that idea. Where I failed was not involving stakeholders. That's my takeaway that I learned from it. And I also failed that it did not necessarily change the culture completely in the way that I thought it would. It did make some difference. But what it also did was weaken my teachers because they didn't think they had to be classroom managers. If there was a problem, just send it to the principal, think simple. And that's not how it works. We had to work in it together. So I learned a good bit about communicating to all stakeholders, studying data that's qualitative and quantitative, learned how to be a problem solver, and explored other ideas to help change that problem.
Describe your decision-making style and give a few examples of strategies you have used in different situations.
You've read my application, so you're going to hear it again. I'm a servant leader. And I believe in understanding an issue, seeing what the current research says about it, communicating with stakeholders, and I'll go back to this, 2 of these, 1 of these, and taking all the information after you've done that and trying to make the most informed decision. Y'all remember those red dots I was telling you about? Now let me tell you what we did. I learned from that. So what I did, we still had the discipline problem, we hadn't corrected it. And we were still at 50th percentile. And my faculty was not satisfied with that, and I wasn't either. We wanted our test scores back up there. We wanted to be like Winfield. So we started doing research. I started researching what are other school districts doing that are losing the industry. Teachers had the same recurring theme over and over and over. Our boys and girls aren't interested in school, they're not interested in homework, they're not interested in learning, they're interested in boys and girls. Aha. So I started doing a lot of research on gender-specific schools. And I found we had some in Alabama. I went up to St. Clair County, Odenville Middle School, and visited some other schools where they had gender-specific, all-boy, all-girl classrooms. I sat down with my student body. They knew me, and they still call me coach. And I talked to them. What do you think about this? Got mixed reactions, but I did a survey with them. I had parent meetings, and we sat down and we talked about separating the boys and girls in the classroom and doing gender-specific classes. I also was dealing with a diverse culture, so it went a little deeper than that, and they had to have a good depth of understanding what the intent was behind the idea. Also invited community leaders, industry people, and talked to them, very intelligent people, same thing. And we had these surveys, and we had this data. And then I did something for the Board of Education. Teachers would bring me some very ugly, we didn't have this thing. So they were writing notes, and they were vulgar. There were some very bad pictures on some of the notes. That just made me a little packet. And I shared with the board what the problems were, and I said, I'm going to give you something to see. I'd like to come to a board meeting. And they knew well in advance. I've done our research, I showed them the data, and I shared with our superintendent everything. And I can remember our board president opening the packet, going through it, and he looked at me and said, Mr. Thomley, what do you want to do? That was my takeaway in learning about decision making and how to help in that situation. We did gender specific classes. We got a lot more out of it than what we thought we would. our achievement did go up. Now, did we get back to the place we wanted to be? No. But one of the interesting things that came out of it was some of our subgroups, their scores went through the roof, especially some of our diverse groups. And I questioned them about it, and they said they felt so much more relaxed and comfortable to learn when they were separated. And our parents were so thrilled about that. That led to me being Alabama Principal of the Year. But it wasn't me, it was the people who made it happen. That's why that happened, and that's why we were able to do things. We problem solved, we researched, we did the things that we did to make it happen. I want to give another example. We had a parent when I was principal at Fayette Middle School. No matter what the teachers did, and they were very, very gracious to this lady, and she was very intelligent. Her child would do no wrong. Teachers would meet. I would meet. Teachers and myself would meet with the parent, and we talked, and we were poor-mouthed, and we were this and we were that. But we maintained our professionalism and our dignity. One day I finally had a great idea, and I won't say a name, but I said, Miss So-and-so, I'd like you to do something. I'd like you to become a substitute teacher for Fayette County Schools. I think it would be good for you. And we did the background check, the fingerprint and everything. And she subbed for me about a week later. Uneventful. Went well. About a week later, she had to sub a second time, and she subbed again. Afternoon, she came to my office, and she said, Mr. Tomley, she didn't call me coach. Mr. Tomley, two things. I will never substitute teach again, and I will never be in your class, your office again about my son. Very sometimes the people who can't see things the way you see them have to walk in your shoes. Now that was a wonderful opportunity, and it changed a relationship, and I really believed it changed the pathway for that young man as well. One more. Being an elementary school principal, you almost have a gender-specific faculty. And early in my career, Mr. Kirkpatrick was addressed about dress at the school. Well, I can tell you, if you're an elementary school teacher, you've got to get down on the floor, you've got to move around, and y'all know what I'm talking about. And the question became about dress. And so different ones were saying things, and I understand about styles, and I understand that's important. And so we were commissioned at all three schools to put a representative together from our school and discuss that. So I chose a representative that I felt like was dressing professionally, but some had taken exception with. It was a wonderful meeting. We all sat down. We all had some great takeaways from it. Each person who represented in that meeting had some great ideas. And what we came away from that meeting was modest and professional dress. And I thought it was wonderful, and to my knowledge, we've not had to attend to that anymore.
Thank you.
First two-part question. Superintendent has to have tremendous passion, belief, and commitment. How do you know when it's time to drive something forward and when it's time to listen and learn? And how do you balance the need for authentic collaboration with the requirements for individual leadership?
Have I told y'all I'm a servant leader? I think you should always ask them is, if you are offered this position and you accept it, will you honor your commitment? And I've had some teachers, that's a good question, because they were looking elsewhere and they had one in their pocket and they couldn't lie to me. I've been offered somewhere else. So I always ask that question. Now, after doing that, as superintendent, I'm going to come to the board and I'm going to tell you just exactly what I just did. And I'm going to say, based on this documentation, this evidence, this research, and talking to these people, I believe this individual best represents the interests of our schools and would be the best candidate for this position. That's the first part of that question. Difficult personnel problem and how you resolve the problem. You asked for one, I'm gonna have to tell you a little bit more than one, okay? During my time, I've been an administrator for 20 years. I've had to non-renew someone very close to my family. I've had to non-renew some people I went to church with. I have had to be in a situation where I have had to tell a teacher that their son died. I have had to tell another teacher that their mother died. And I had to tell them right then. And I say that because when you care about people and you love them, it's very difficult. I also had to dismiss the custodian at Fayette. That's where I'm gonna start. And it was pretty easy and transparent. He came to school intoxicated. He was no brainer. This gentleman had worked in the mines for several years. He was much of a man, and he was loved by everybody in the school. And when he was dismissed, he was very sorrowful, not for getting caught and for the choice that he made. He was sorrowful for the choice that he made. And he wept, that big 6'4" man wept like a baby. And like it broke my heart. And I learned from that beginning in August all the way to April, every time, if somebody wasn't doing their job, I want to talk to you about classroom management. Here's what we need to do, documentation. And that one person that was very close to my family, we did that. Second time, I want to come in your classroom because you teach something I'm certified in. I want to model teaching. Well, you're doing it, but they respect you. Yeah, but I'm gonna do it anyway. Next time I came, and I'm dating myself a little bit, I brought VCR tapes. Here are some things for you to review that are instructional practices in classroom management that will be of help to you. And when we got to April, and I had to make that decision, I didn't have to tell that young man anything, and I didn't, because he was non-tenured. But I had a moral obligation to myself to know that I had done everything within my power to help that person be better before that decision was made. I had to make a hire in transportation. And I want you to listen to these next two, because these were one fell. I had one gentleman who had a situation where his spouse had died. He had a great disposition with children, a good man, and it was, he would have made a great driver. I had another gentleman who was a brother to a member of our faculty. Good disposition, great person, would have made a great driver. And I had another gentleman who had worked every day with children, great disposition. When I made my hire, there were some hurt feelings. My recommendation, I'm sorry, I don't hire. And I always tell them I recommend Board of Education hires. And there were some hard feelings. But I also know that I prayed about it a lot. And God's favor has been on those persons, and I think things worked out better for them. My first year as principal, I had to hire a reading coach. I had 5 good applicants. Mr. Kirkpatrick would not tell me a thing, and he shouldn't have. He was trying to find out what kind of leader I was. And it was difficult because every one of them could have done a great job in that position. And I was in my first year, and I was very nervous about that. We had just moved here, and I left tenure in Fayette as a tenured principal, and I'm a contract principal here. And I remember sitting in that office looking across his desk and said, Mr. Kirkpatrick, I've talked to him, I've interviewed him, I've watched him, and this is, in my opinion, the best choice. And I remember putting him across the desk to him, and he looked at me and he said, well, that's who I would have chose too, and I wanted to choke him. But he was doing his job. First year as principal again, same year. Mr. Kirkpatrick told me, he said, you know, I went one time 11 years without having to hire a teacher. That speaks of the wonderful school district we had. And he said, you know what? In all my years as principal, I've never had to move a teacher in the summer to a different grade but one time. Guess what happened to me first year? 20 kindergartners enrolled over the summer. And a young lady had already put names on the desk. She was a second grade teacher. And I had to move her to kindergarten. And I helped her move. And 14 years later, she's still in kindergarten. She's a great teacher. God's favor is not Linfield, I'm blessed. Those are difficult decisions, but they're not difficult when you love and you care about people and you're sincere.
The next question is, what is your plan for boosting and keeping morale among employees high?
This is cliche, but it's very powerful. They don't care how much you know till they know how much you care. I'm gonna be a visible presence in all the buildings. I'm gonna speak to the teachers. I'm gonna speak to those ladies that get here very early in the morning in the lunchroom. And I'm gonna praise Sandy and Kevin for those CNP workers. I love my bus drivers. They're the first ones that meet and greet our children. And they are the foundation of what makes us great. I'm gonna speak to all my teachers and love and respect them, hold them accountable. Let my principals be instructional leaders and building managers. Let them hold our teachers accountable as well and support them in doing their jobs. And I think when you do that, you also do things like you write notes. Sometimes you used to have these carts that you put the overhead projectors on. One day Kathy Sproul and I just went around to every classroom. I remember that, and I said, do you want chocolate or banana? We brought ice cream to them, and we just scooped it out for them. Appreciate you in the job that you do. Cook for my bus drivers, 10 funerals, go to sporting events. Same thing, model morale by being authentic, genuine, compassionate, and show that you care. And whether it's right to say it or not, and I hope it is, I'm a prayer warrior. I've got a list, and I believe in that.
High performance by students and accountability are priorities for us. How would you assess the current student performance levels in our school system? How would you assess the effectiveness of our teachers and programs?
Great answer for this. I was hired 14 years ago as elementary school principal. I remember coming up here, I'm gonna digress for a minute. For 1 year, I kept an application on the counter of my kitchen when Peggy Sizemore had retired. And then the next year, the elementary school principal, Steve Harrison, talked to me. Came back, and we sat in there for about 2 hours. And when I came up the first time, I didn't wear a tie. It was an informal meeting, and Mr. Kirkpatrick, and you know, and we talked, and we talked, and we talked. Well, I went back home, and I told the Dawn, I said, honey, we're gonna have to pray about this and be very serious about this because everything he said makes a lot of sense to me. The second time we met, now I was dressed appropriately, and it was a formal interview. He took me to the elementary school. We were standing at the bottom of the ramp that goes up the steps upstairs. And he looked at me and he said, Mr. Thomley, the job's yours if you want it. 2 things. Number 1, you're gonna have to move to Winfield. Number 2, if you don't get the job done, I'll fire you. And that got all over me, game on, in a good way. Nobody had ever talked to me that way before. And I was like, I'll show you. And it let me know exactly what the expectation, at least I thought it did, what the expectation was, so I accepted that job. Well, let's move ahead. So we get near the end of the year, and at that particular time, the assessment, which is always changing for our school, 3rd and 4th grade was R+. We're sitting in here, and I've already seen it. And he goes, Mr. Thomley, and these may not be exact, but you'll get the gist of this. 3rd grade reading R+, 95%. 3rd grade math, 96%. 4th grade reading, 94%. 4th grade math, 97%. I'm sitting up there. He says, those are pretty good. We can do better. Game on. And he modeled what the expectation was. We're right there, but we can do more. So I think we've had that expectation, and we continue to have that expectation. We study data, we look at data. We used to be very teacher-centered in our instruction, and we are now very student-centered in our instruction, but that's not changed the way we observe data. We benchmark test, that's very important. Our student performance is very high, and I can say this with not batting an eye. We have the greatest teachers and the greatest support staff in the state of Alabama. The only thing that they don't know, says the boy from Selma, Alabama, who's been at Fayette and Sweetwater, is they don't know what they're going to have because they haven't been somewhere else. We are very blessed in what we have. Again, I think that we're heading in a very good direction with our math and reading. Just this past week, our teachers were doing professional development on our reading horizons. They understand what the expectation is. They are always willing to pull from additional resources to get the job done. They don't hesitate to reteach if it's necessary. I think that our teachers are very effective in maintenance of teachers, administration, coaches, because we have a silver tsunami. We have an aging faculty. But I would put our teachers and our support staff against anybody in the state.
Expectations for student achievement for all children is high in Winfield, and eliminating the achievement gap is a moral commandment. What approaches would you pursue? What leadership and guidance would you provide to ensure that these approaches are properly evaluated and adjusted over time to meet changing student needs? Please describe any successes you have had in these areas.
I've got notes, I know y'all see it, I want you to see what it did afterwards. There's two words, they're bold and they're underlined. Moral command. That should be in every school district in the state of Alabama. It is a moral command. We should give of our heart and soul everything that we got to these children. What approaches would you pursue? What leadership and guidance provide? We're kind of at a crossroads right now on our state assessment. We have, in my time here, went from ARC Plus and SAT 10 to 1 year we did some Terra Nova testing. Another year we started using ACT Aspire, and our students thrived in that, and I really like that data. But about 80% of the state did not thrive in that data. Last year we used Scantron as our assessment. Dr. Eric Mackey, our new state superintendent, is going to use something that's called Data Recognition Corporation to be our new assessment. A lot of people see this as a throwaway year because we can't take Scantron and compare it to ACT Aspire, and we can't take Scantron and compare it to data recognition. Well, guess what? We're still going to get a state report card, and we're still going to get a grade based on that data. Fair or unfair, that's how it is. So we've got to give credence to that testing. We've got to examine our data. We've got to look at the scope and the sequence of the way that we offer instruction. And I say we've got to do that. We are doing that. Our teachers do that. And they assess on a daily basis. They don't just assess with data. They assess with instruction. They look to see, have those learners not just got the knowledge base of this, but can they make practical application of what I've presented to them? Are they starting to make connections? We went, I guess you would say, from, y'all know what Roy G. Biv is?
Mm-hmm.
I do too. I understand acronyms, but do you understand the practical application that when light hits a prism, it causes refraction? Roy G. Biv, that's the knowledge base. We move up the Bloom's taxonomy, and I think our teachers are doing that with student-centered learning. Also, in how we pursue the best for our teachers and how we meet changing needs. We talk to people. We talk to Arab city schools. We talk to Coleman City Schools, we talk to Mountain Brook, we talk to Homewood, because they're serious about that instruction. Now, not all of them match our culture. Probably the closest it does is ARAP. Some of those others, one of those others, has much more amenities and finances than we do. However, we know they're very passionate about what they do, and so we communicate with them. We talk to each other about ideas. Successes you've had in areas as far as student needs and meeting changing needs. So you can appreciate this and one in this room. When I was an elementary principal, and I got to stand up for this, Dr. Catherine Mitchell led an initiative, and she was right, when we needed to get more phonics-based and stronger in our offering our instruction. This was heresy, but I was commissioned to take those basal readers away from those elementary school teachers. And I was just naive enough, because I had a background in secondary and middle school, that we did it. And we adopted Read Well. And it was phonics rich, it was knowledge based, but it was what our children needed, because our culture was changing. And we did that to mastery in our instruction. Now, did our teachers sneak up to the book room and occasionally pull the basal reader out? Sure they did. You know why? Because they were going to go over and beyond what was expected of them to make sure that this one or two was getting what they learned. And they've always taken that. Jump ahead a little bit more forward. We used to do the packets, the SAT-10 packets, ARC Plus packets, send them home. Teacher-centered instruction, knowledge based. What's the practical application piece? It was missing. We went to a one-to-one initiative. And we started doing some things where project-based learning, problem solving. Students had to go to synthesis, analysis. How did you arrive at this decision? We started using Go Math. I can remember being in Miss Clappus's room and her modeling something, and she did it 3 different ways. And she knew me, and I'm very OCD and ADD and a lot of other things. And there was one person in the classroom that got it that way, and she looked at me and I didn't even have to say that. She said, "You understood it that way, didn't you?" I said, "Yes, ma'am, I did." But we give our children more than one way to learn instruction. And when our administrators evaluate our teachers, the state provides us Educate Alabama. When you do that, you're observing the teacher. We went beyond that. We have an instrument called Elliott. When they use that, they're not observing the teachers, they're observing the kids. What a great idea. That's the ones that we're interested in. Are they engaged? Are they doing higher order thinking? Or do they have the psychological safety to fail and know that that's okay, because we can back up and do it again? The greatest learning I've ever had is from the failures that I've had.
Describe your experience in developing and implementing curriculum and instructional programs to raise the student achievement. How would you evaluate the instructional program, and how would you make changes to the instructional program?
That's real tricky when you consider going from teacher-centered to student-centered instruction. Because when I was at Fayette, we studied SAT-9 back in that day. Tests, content clusters, process clusters, how they align, just kicking down here, how they align with our curriculum. We examined the scope and sequence, and that's very important when you look at standards and how you offer instruction. A textbook may offer it a certain way, but if the scope and sequence of instruction is not presented in a way where the child can make connections, oftentimes there's a disconnect. So we pay very careful attention to the scope and sequence in the way that we offer instruction. Now, understanding that alignment helped when we go to curriculum adoption and determining what text and what we want to use, even though now a lot of our text is through technology. And we are an advanced ed STEM certified school. I'm about to tell, I know you've been wondering when that was on. Mention that. I'm very proud of that. Our Governor Ivey, has what's called GOAT. Are y'all familiar with GOAT? GOEWT. the Governor's Office of Education and Workforce Transformation. I did a career tech meeting yesterday. That was my fall break. We had a representative from the state come and speak to us. And he talked to us about workforce development, because I'm attending to both facets here, the academics and the career pathways. 34 of the 40 highest jobs that are going to be available to our students and in the future are STEM jobs. You want to know some of the irony of that is, some of those only simply require graduation from high school and a credential. There's where your trades come in. He also told us, you know, Hurricane Michael came from Little Mexico, Florida, all the way to Georgia. There is not enough skilled labor to do what they need to do to give everybody power back and get everybody back. And they're going to, but it's going to take more time because we don't have the skilled labor workforce that we need. And we've got to change the stigmata about that. But we've got to do that while we still offer rigorous content, hold our kids accountable, and enable learning and achieving to become important and produce effective citizens. But that's different pathways for some than it is for others. And we've talked about if, when I do my 4-year plan in the 9th grade, and I say, you know, I think I'm gonna be a mechanical engineer. Or Randy, you know, you made C's and F's in math, we might need to examine something else. And you do it with love and compassion. What do you think about this or that? And you talk to kids that way. There's gonna be a high demand, according to Alabama labor markets, for skilled labor. And some of the 18 to 20-year-old kids, and we're told this by business and industry, can make $30,000 to $40,000 in that first year. And you know what they want from us? Soft skills. If work starts at 1 o'clock, I want you to know that means getting here at 10 minutes before work starts and be ready to work at 1 o'clock. Understand, I don't have it with me. Don't do this. And when we did all these surveys, which we'll do with the NATEF research, they kept saying they need to know what to do without being told if they complete a task. Find something else to do. That's a little diverse, but it attends to both facets. I think it's important for our school district.
Thank you.
Describe your ability to cultivate a disciplined, safe, and orderly school environment.
You may have heard this, I'm not sure, but we say it a lot. It's been said, discipline is yours to lose in Winfield, because it's here. And our teachers have discipline. They know that they are supported by the administration. And I know I'm repeating some things that I've said, but it lends itself to the question. And the administration can do that because they know they are supported by the superintendent and the board. When you have discipline, you can challenge students, you can hold them accountable. And the other thing that makes that great is that's the expectation of our parents. They expect no less than that as well. Because we have that, because our board allows our administrators to do that, and we hold each other accountable. And as superintendent, I would expect my teachers to hold me accountable, my support personnel to hold me accountable. And I know y'all would, but we hold each other accountable. You have to do that. So to cultivate that discipline, I think we continue to do the things that we are doing. I know we're examining board policy and the things that are in it and what we value and what we believe, and those are important. And it goes back to some things I've said. It takes the whole village to raise the child. That includes the people who are offering the instruction, but the parents are a vital part of that as well. Safe and orderly environment. I can talk a lot about that. As y'all know, school safety is paramount right now. There's a lot of concern. We've done a lot of things, in my opinion, to help that. I think we have very safe entrance ways. I was thinking about that on the way up there. I said, you know, if I don't have my scan card, I'm not going to be able to get in the building. And we have that at the elementary school. And I think we have a plan for that at the high school. We know we want to do something. We attended a safety summit that we initiated this summer and had several school districts represented. We had a person from the Secret Service speak to us. It was very engaging and enriching. I think some of y'all attended it. We also had someone who is a renowned specialist, Michael Dorn, come and vet our school for 3 days. He looked at our day-to-day operations. He looked at our bus drivers, how we open and close school. He watched kids pull out of the parking lot. He looked and tried to get in buildings and doors. And we're waiting to get a report from him to see what his recommendations are about some of the best practices that we can have. We also have in place a program that's called Inside, and in that we list the people who are important, like our law enforcement, our EMA, and we update, and we have their phone numbers, their email addresses, Alabama Power. We had something happen this summer, and they used our special needs buses, and they had to cut power off because they thought they might have a chemical in the air. And those things happen, but we have something in place for that. It did not affect our school, but they did use our buses, and we took some folks who were disabled using our school buses. Our administrators offer monthly fire, weather, or school safety drills. Those are recorded on the inside. Our law enforcement have access to that information. We also have a camera system in all our buildings. Our law enforcement has access to that. Our school nurses go on field trips with anybody who has written in their IEPs that they need a nurse with them. Our coaches and bus drivers are trained in CPR and in the use of the AED, and we have defibrillators in all schools. We even have coaches that take them with them on some events if they think a school might not have one. Something that we do through the Alabama High School Athletic Association, our coaches have what's called an EAP, Emergency Action Plan, and our students are instructed. You go open the gate, you meet the ambulance, you go get the AED, you call 911, and they go over that plan with them. Twice a year, our bus drivers do front and back evacuations with our buses. Our coaches do that too. And I think y'all remember, I think it was 2 years ago, Don Thomas was the astronaut that spoke to us. I'm gonna be careful about this because I don't want this to be, I don't know who's gonna watch it film. But we got a place, we'll take our kids if we ever had, heaven forbid, a crisis situation. And we knew when we did that, we pretended that the affected building was the elementary school. And we bused our middle and high school students to that safe place. And we invited our first responders, our law enforcement officials. We examined how we would unload, what was the best practice. We also talked as building administrators about who had homerooms so those people could stand out front, meet parents. You don't have panic, but you can control that panic. Who are you here to get? Sign this checkout list, radio, and send them up. And that's something we hope we never have to use. But we've done a lot of things. We have a lot of good practices already in place, but can we improve? I'll go back to what I was told 14 years ago. Sure we can.
What do you think the role of extracurricular activities and career pathways should be in our school system?
I think athletics build a lot of character. You might not look at me and believe it or not, but at 5'10", I got to college and I'm a first-year graduate because I had a basketball scholarship and in Selma and played community college basketball at Wallace. In my 6 years as athletic director, we've had 6 state championships, 3 state runner-ups. And when I say that, I have the title. The people that did that are why we have what we have. I'm not taking any credit for that. The people who work with those children, who live with those children, held them accountable as an athlete, just like they do as a student in the classroom, helped us. We've consistently competed in competitions and made state playoffs and been very competitive. We have, and I highlighted this, cross-country scholarships, volleyball scholarships, track scholarships, football scholarships, baseball scholarships, golf scholarships, and basketball scholarships. Those are pathways that got our children a way in to start their education. We have one gentleman that may one day be an Olympic athlete. Athletics are very important, but extracurricular, not athletics. We have great band programs. Our band constantly gets superior ratings. We have a lot of children that perform in our bands. We have a winter guard, and we have an indoor drum line that get exemplary scores every time they compete. We have robotics for our children who have an interest in those areas. And on most given years, we have 220 student athletes that are involved. Why do we have discipline and structure in our schools? We hold them accountable. They've got to go to class, they've got to learn, they've got to go to practice, then they got to get home and do a lesson, because they're going to show up to school the next day and there's a lot expected of them. I think that's what helps. We're teaching our children about organization and discipline very early in their life by maintaining what we do through our extracurricular programs. In terms of career pathways, I've shared about the governor's initiative. We currently have 5 young men who are in an internship program through in Bauer. They're going to graduate and have an opportunity to go straight to work. And they also get basically a dual enrollment credit for what they're doing. I'd like to see that expand with Tiffin or Heister. There's an interest in welding. In our career tech programs, we offer auto mechanics. We offer family and consumer science a little bit, but mostly it's education and training. We have a preschool, and it's amazing because it's not just females that are working with those children. It's boys and girls. We have cooperative education. Last year, Miss Carlo's cooperative education produced $130,000 that went back into our community. We also have business management, agri-science. I think I've told everyone, I know y'all know that we have these programs. Some other things that we do with our 10th graders is we job shadow, and we try to always do it around Groundhog Day. Every 10th grader in the school goes to some business and they job shadow for that day. We take 3 buses and we take them out and let them work with different business and industry. Our 8th grade this past week went to World of Works in Tuscaloosa, had an opportunity to see career pathways, and if you believe in the psychomotor part, they got to take a trial and be a brick mason. They got to work on a simulated welder. They had a birthing thing for somebody who's interested in medical. There's a lot of different things. And not only did they have them, but they had signs out there and said, this is the degree that you need to, if you're going to choose this pathway, and this is a salary range of what you'll make. How valuable is that to an 8th grader in a pathway? I want to invite you next Tuesday to the elementary school. We're going to have a Career on Wheels Day. We had it last year. Matthew Vines is our career coach. He set that up. If you've had a chance to eat at Hiro, the Japanese restaurant's good. They're going to provide some fruit. They're Career on Wheels. And so our elementary school is getting some career pathways very early in their formative years. We have advisory council meetings and we solicit their recommendations on best practices. We ask them what we can do to be better. We understand that we're not a career tech center and we're somewhat limited. And this was a big thing at my meeting yesterday in Montgomery. If I'm a very academic-minded student, and I'm either a band student or I am an athlete, it's very difficult to credential or get those career tech credits because I'm landlocked in 4x4 in my academics, and I've got an athletics period. And the state recognizes that. They've done away with BIC, and they're going to let workforce development drive industry decisions.
In Winfield City Schools, the superintendent handles the operations of a variety of programs and duties due to the size of the district. Explain your experiences with dealing with different programs such as special education, federal programs, career tech, at-risk programs and so forth. How would you approach the budget process to ensure success during these financially challenging times?
I wear a lot of hats. I'm gonna look over at the sermons a little bit. And I'm gonna say this because it was the first one mentioned, special education. I've had the privilege, you may say privilege, of going through 2 due process hearings in special education where Donald Sweeney officiated on it. One of them was in Winfield, one of them was in Fayette. In both instances, what was wanted was additional services for the child, which is by right what should happen. In both instances, Mr. Sweeney assured that the LEA was providing services, were being good stewards to the IEP, and that there were some things they could do better. In one of the school districts, not ours, he did assure the parent that the services was what they was gonna get and nothing more. And at the end of both of those due process hearings, they ended in mediation, which was good because the child did sincerely get what she needed. And it was not at an expense to the LEA that was hurtful because everybody was in agreement we needed to do what was best for our children. Why I say that was very invaluable to me is because when you learn that, you learn that you don't want to be in those situations. And you develop relationships and you write IEPs and you talk to parents and you communicate very effectively about their education because it is different. It is a different pathway than our traditional education. Does that devalue them as persons? Absolutely not. And we have a commitment to help all of our boys and girls. And so to me, that was very valuable. Federal programs, I had the opportunity to work for about a year in that with Mrs. Box. I learned a lot about our title programs, Title I, Title II, classroom size reduction. When I came to Winfield in 2005, we were a target-assisted Title I school. And what that meant was anything that was purchased, materials and supplies, was supposed to be labeled in the library, and only a boy or girl who was a title student could read that book. Only a boy or girl who was a title student could get offered instruction from a title teacher. That's a little bit, that's not a best practice in my opinion. However, as time has changed, our poverty has risen, and we are a school-wide title school at the elementary and middle school. So all of our children receive services. We still have a class room size reduction teacher. And all of our boys and girls are able to use the materials and supplies that are purchased through our title. And we have great people in our central office staff that are good stewards over our budget, over our federal programs and special education, and we have had for a long time. I am Career Tech Director. I've talked to you a lot about that. I've shared with you just in the last question about our pathways, about our programs. We're gonna go through NATEF certification. I made 2 teachers very happy yesterday when I told them that BIC is no longer, and they were up for BIC certification. We're not gonna have it anymore. So they were, woo-hoo, when I told them. We've got to get to a place where we remove the stigmata about workforce and what skilled labor is. My daddy's a tooling maker. He worked, and I also probably had the greatest learning, probably by accident, when I worked in the planer mill for 3 summers. And I worked on a maintenance crew. And I learned how to use a acetylene torch. I learned how to use a 6011 and a 7018. I can weld. I can vertical weld, horizontal weld, and I can weld hydraulic. Now, I'm not saying but I can tell you where it served me. When I was in Fayette, I had a gentleman very upset with me, and like I told you before, I got out from behind my desk, I sat in a different chair, and I started talking to him about 6011, 7018 welding rods. All of a sudden, my tie fell off. I wasn't wearing a shirt. I was just another guy. And I had a little bit of depth of understanding with that fellow when I talked to him, and he understood that, yeah, I know what you're talking about. So we got to appreciate, this country was built by our blue-collar workers. How do you articulate to children in the 9th grade pathways? You do it through guidance, you do it through saying, what academics are you very successful in? What do you think about this? And I think this is so important. You bring those kids that's gone to Nucor, you bring those kids that's gone and work somewhere else and say, hey man, look here, I'm 18, 19-year-old, I got my own truck. I'm doing this. I don't have $25,000 worth of student loan debt, and I'm making a career for myself. We've got some kids that are going to participate in our military. My daughter's an E5, I know what that is. And we've got Valerie Tidwell, who is a major, who is also going to be our Veterans Day speaker, and that's Thursday, by the way, before the Friday on Veterans Day. That's because we might quite in the playoffs. OCD, or ABD. Transportation. I've had the opportunity to hire drivers. I do a report that is responsible for our fuel. I can tell you that last year we got 6.32 miles per gallon on all of our school buses. This year we got 6.28. When we do a lot of traveling, so I'm very careful to spread out the different buses to try to keep the mileage low. Bus drivers get very territorial about their buses. Sometimes I have to take a bus away from a driver and give it to a different driver because it's getting too many miles on it. And they didn't like that the first couple of years after they started figuring it out, and I showed them data. And I still don't try to do it much, but we do it if it's necessary. We get used to $6,500 for fleet renewal, and that's good for 10 years. A bus costs about $80,000. Currently, we're getting $7,500 for fleet renewal. So we're not still getting the return on investment, but it's pretty close. We've got an 18, a 17, a 16, a 14. We're going in a pretty good sequence when we have 9 routes and a day route. In a perfect world, we'd rotate a bus every single year. But we had 2 years where we had 2 08s and 2 09s, and I wasn't involved in any of that. And those are about to come off. But we're currently getting fleet renewal on 5. I like my bus drivers. We map our bus routes. I mentioned about the evacuation, and I love substitute bus drivers. When you can get anybody that was willing to do that, you get them because they're very difficult. We randomly drug screen our bus drivers, and that includes the coaches if they have their CDLs. I've learned a lot through transportation. At risk, I've talked to you about, and I won't go back into it, but working with our building principals on the drills, the AEDs, our nurses, the name of Don Thomas, Mr. Dorn. Athletic director, I've shared with you what's happened with that. I've evaluated teachers. I've evaluated, I do program evaluation with our coaches. I evaluate the administrators in an instrument that's called Lead Alabama, and this is the 6th year in doing that. And it's a very collaborative evaluation system. They pick out 2 items for a PLP. We communicate back and forth, and they work on things that will support their effectiveness as building leaders, as building managers and instructional leaders. Say all that to say that I really feel like I've had a hand in just about every operation in the day-to-day operations of the school district. Does that mean I know everything? Not even close. But I feel like all of those things have helped to tremendously prepare me for the position of superintendent. The second piece to that question was budget. Through my opportunity to be a federal programs person, I've learned to spend federal dollars and spend state dollars, and lastly, spend your local dollars and try to get it. And you've got a CSFO that's very good at, and when I say moving things around the right way, and as a superintendent, I think you have to have daily communications with your CSFO, study your budget. And I know I had to do this as a building principal. I want to spend this money on it. You can't do that. Why? That's supplanting. Well, then I don't need to do that. and you need to have those kind of relationships when you do that. Need to explore grant opportunities. Miss Benton has got our program going, and if I understood her correctly, I don't want to say this wrong, but I think she's got a chance to get a $120,000 grant, which is what we had in what was it called? Stepping stones to begin with. And of course, it became self-sustaining. Well, there's an opportunity out there to do that again. Think what we could do with that after school tutoring, instruction, STEM. Wow. Also mentioned about studying the financial statements, and also speak to other superintendents about best practices with your finances.
When a new superintendent is hired, you want to make the transition as smooth as possible for everyone. How would you help both with the educational community and the community at large adjust to the new governing style that would come with a new superintendent?
Yeah, stand up on this one too. We've had great leaders, and I want you to think about the profoundness of this statement. Dale Brazier, Terrell Kirkpatrick, Keith Davis, 3 superintendents over 40 years. Find another school district in the state that can say that. If I'm superintendent of Winfield, I'm gonna be standing on the shoulders of some giants. Each one of them had a different situation, a different circumstance, but a common goal. The best interest of boys and girls is what a superintendent should have. He's got to be an effective communicator, an effective leader. And this is of most importance. The people that made those things happen are you Brenda Taylors, are you Carol Dickinson, are you Donald Ewings, are you Larry Moores, are you Judy Grays, are you Callie Woodley, are you Randy Carruthers, are your, I can go on and on. Those are your foot soldiers. Those are the people that are in the trenches every day, and the reason why we are great, because it's not just a job for them. They're committed to what they do, they're held accountable for what they do, and they're very passionate about what they do. So that has a lot to do with the governing style as a superintendent. And I'll go back to what I said usually in my application. I'm a servant leader. I'm here, and I think what you model for others is very important. And I'm so thankful. I used to cut the grass in front of the elementary school and help roof the concession stand, and expect no less out of any of our others. We do, and what we have to do. But one other thing, and as a superintendent, have an open door policy, 2 years.
What methods of communicating with parents have you found most effective, and how would you encourage parental involvement? How do you plan to communicate with the public on matters of school concern?
You know what's a lost art? Face-to-face engagement. And I like that. I believe that's the most effective way to communicate with anybody. And I know you gotta be careful with this, but sometimes when you're coming by somebody and you give them that old preacher hug, and you just put your arm around them and tell them, hey, I appreciate what you're doing. You gotta be careful about that, but I believe communicating, sometimes communicating is not just about spoken word. It can be a smile. It can be a thought. It can be a written letter. It can be a number of different things. And there's a time and a place for how you communicate with parents. I've had situations before where somebody's engine was running real hot. I want to talk to you right now about, but I knew them. And so let me ask you something first before you do. Your motor's running a little hot. Now, if they was a complete stranger, I wouldn't dare say that to them. But I know when I say, if you take a little bit of time and just take a little bit of reflection, I want you to think about it, and I want you to think about what's happened. And then, when your engine's not hot, let's talk about it. And by the way, I'm just going to go ahead and tell you, have you talked to the coach? Because that's going to be the first thing I say. Well, he won't listen. Well, I'm still going to tell you that, but I want you to do some reflection. And I'm going to tell him that I'm going to tell him that when you're not in this situation. And by the way, after you've talked to him, if you don't feel like you've accomplished what you want, I'll be glad to talk to you. But then after I talk to you, I'm going to talk to him. And that's the way we need to do this. And I think on a lot of occasions, people want to be heard, they want to be valued, they want to know that you are willing to listen to what they say. Sometimes you don't have to fix things, you just have to be a good listener. Sometimes it's not that way. Sometimes you can be like I was with that lady that was in Fayette. You listen, you listen, you listen, you listen, and you can't always make them a substitute teacher. Sometimes you just have to make a tough decision, and sometimes no has to be the answer. And that's what you have to do, but that also goes with the responsibility that goes with this position. In terms of communicating information to parents, we do a school cast. I think that's a good thing. I like school cast. If you want to tell them that we're gonna close school, that's a very effective tool. I think it's important, and this has been said to me, for them to hear the superintendent's voice and tell them. Because of inclement weather, we're going to have early release and they get that phone call. I think that it is an effective tool in communicating information. I think the text message that we use sometimes with that school cast is a very good thing, because some of our younger people appreciate text message and they like text message when they get them that way. Had this situation occur, talking about communication. We had a school bus got hit about 2-3 years ago. It got rear-ended out near Eldridge. The funny thing, when I say funny, ironic thing was, some of the kids on the bus didn't even know it got hit, because buses sit high and the car ran up under it. So even though that happened, when it happened, we got the name of everybody who was on that bus. We had the school nurse examine every one of those kids. We had the building principals call every student that was on that bus. I want you to know this happened. We don't think anybody's hurt. We had our nurse look at them. Thank you so much for letting us know that. That's a level of transparency and communication. Sometimes you have things happen that are very intense, and we have within our campuses what we are saying is more or less a threat assessment team, a building administrator, a guidance counselor, our special needs and federal programs coordinators on that team. When necessary, law enforcement. Also, when necessary, mental health. After they've determined what the level of that situation was, then it's incumbent on the superintendent, based on that recommendation, to say, how do we need to effectively inform parents? It's also prudent to make sure that we have all of our information when we share that information.
Thank you.
Based on the fact that the new superintendent will start in the middle of the year, what are the first few things that you're going to do if you are hired as superintendent? And what do you view as our system's greatest potential for improvement?
I'm going to ensure that the faculty and staff understand that we're going to love them, support them through our board, through our superintendent, that we're going to allow them the opportunity to implement the pedagogy and methodology that they think is most effective. Some of our teachers believe that the STEM projects, the MSTI, a lot of different projects are very effective. Some don't buy in quite as easily. That's fine. Offer instruction in your classroom the way that you think that you're going to give those learners the opportunity to be successful. And even through that initiative, there are times with haiku and or if it was like a Blackboard, a learning management system, and doing projects, that you still need to put pencil to paper. My first degree was physical education. I had taken anatomy and kinesiology. Eileen Dixon, Dr. Dixon was my anatomy teacher. And I remember it so well. She said, Randy, a bone is a bone is a bone. There's 206 of them. You gotta learn them and you gotta memorize them. There's no other way about it. That's how it is. You've got to be able to identify them all. And in lab, that's what it was. It was rote memorization. There are times, especially in your lower grades, where the knowledge-based learning and the practical application of pencil and paper are prudent. We need to take every advantage of the STEM that we offer. We need to ensure that we give our teachers the resources they need to be successful. And again, we need to hold them accountable. Our administration does that. Superintendent needs to hold the administration accountable. The school board holds the superintendent, and when you do that as a collective whole, that's how you are successful. System's greatest potential for improvement. I've talked a good bit, there's two things I would say. Carefully examine the recruitment of teachers, administrators, and support staff. A lot of the people that are here have stayed here for a long time, and they understand why things are the way they are, and they understand Winfield. I was, as Mr. Kirkpatrick used to say, he stole me from Fayette. We recruited teachers, and we stole, and we looked for the best people to be in our school district. And we need to examine, I could tell you some data, and I wouldn't want to offend our coaches, but breaking down some varsity or middle school or different age groups, sometimes the median age is about 52 years old. And so we need to examine putting personnel in place, seeing what our future is in that recruitment. I also think we very much so, and when I say that, I know I'm 54 years old, but I run marathons, and I'm gonna remind you all that. We also need to look at our trades and those pathways for our children and our business partners. We've got diversity in Winfield, and that is in economic diversity. And we need to give them every opportunity to be successful. And as a baby boomer myself, I hear the recurring theme: skilled labor, trades, great careers, not what they used to be. Sometimes just a credential, sometimes just a 2-year associate's degree to make a very good living doing so. To me, those two things are potential for improvement.
Okay, final question. Do you have any questions for the board?
Y'all ready to go, didn't I? I have a statement. I want to say, and it's not a question. And it's, I thought about it a lot. First, I want to thank you for the opportunity to interview. Second, I want to quote something to you. Dr. Martin Luther King said, you might wonder where I'm going with this, but he made the statement, "I hope to be judged on the quality of my character and not the color of my skin." I'm going to take half of that, and I'm going to say to you as a board, I hope as you're making the decision for the superintendent, I've been here 14 years, that you will examine the quality of my character, the passion of my heart, the love that I have for the boys and girls of Winfield, the love that I have for this faculty and staff, and I promise to uphold the dignity and the achievement and the honor that goes with being superintendent of this school district. And I want to thank you for this opportunity. That's it.
Thank you.